Welcome, everybody, to the ConTech Exec Podcast. I'm here today with Peter Lasensky from Command Post. It's going to be a good one today. Peter, thanks for being here today. We've had some conversation before. Just, how are things going today?
It's going good. Robert, thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate that.
Yeah, not a problem. Well, listen, everybody always wants to know when we always start these conversations, there's always a pain point, right? Where we decide, man, I've had enough. Now, you've been in the construction industry longer than I have, I think, or we're looking about the same kind of years. But what was the point where you just said, okay, I'm not, swinging a hammer anymore. I'm not doing this part of the construction. I'm going into the actual kind of technology side of this world and gonna make some real changes. What was the point? What happened?
Well, that's a great question. The saying, necessity is the mother of invention. I created my own saying, pain is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
I took it to the next level there.
Yeah.
But I was a contractor back east. I became a union contractor, and between the weather and the unions, I decided to sell my business, move to San Diego, start another company.
I think you made a good choice there.
Yeah, I did. Honestly, I was 25 at the time, and I started very early with a business. And I asked myself, in 15 years, do I want to have a 25-year-old company in Philadelphia, or do I want to have a 15-year-old business in California? And I decided that I wanted a 15-year-old business in California. So I packed up my wife, 2 cats, and a bird.
Yeah. So again, that is a huge move, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a big decision. It's a huge move. And, you have an established, maybe 10-year-old company there in Philadelphia. You've kind of been going through it a little bit, obviously, but something had to happen that said, hey, man, why am I going to go do this? And so let's talk first a little bit, I guess, what is Command Post and what does it do for the industry?
Yeah. Before I jump to that, I do want to go through the rest of the pain point there that led to it. If I could. So yeah, I had, pain points that drove me to move to California, mainly weather. It was very difficult to work there, and their unions made it difficult. So, but when I got here, I started fresh. I decided that I was going to instead of doing all the work myself, I was going to subcontract, the things that were harder to do, and I was going to do self-perform the ones that were consistently profitable, like demolition and framing. And at any rate, 10 years into it, I built a building for a customer in San Diego here in Poway. And the customer they were basically a software company, believe it or not, at that time.
Uh-huh.
And the customer didn't pay me at the end of the job, owed me about $100,000, and I had to sue. And as you know, if you have to sue, 2 years later, you get your day in court, so to speak. And this turn, we elected to do it as an arbitration. And, this room that had about 20 people in there, maybe 30 people. Everybody was getting paid but me in this arbitration. It was frustrating.
Yes.
And not only was I not getting paid, I had to pay my superintendent to sit through the whole thing as well.
Right.
The worst part of it was that they concocted all these reasons, right? They brought in experts to say this and that, and for a reason that he shouldn't have to pay for any of this. And it was super frustrating because I was losing. The arbitrator was his name was Pete Ippolito. He was, he looked like Al Pacino and talked like him and acted like him. And he looked at me and says, Peter, I believe you, but you got to have proof. You can't just say stuff, right? And, the guys just didn't write things down. They don't do it very well either today. And, we would hold up the paychecks till Friday, right? The Friday comes, we'd get our envelope with the daily reports in it, which had, we used to joke that it would have a smiley face on there because there was virtually no information. I think they did them all in their truck on Friday afternoon before they came in. And so in this case, it was really painful because the owner was a real jerk about everything, and he was sticking it to me, and he felt really good about it. And sometimes people stick it to you, but they make you feel good about it. This guy it really got under my skin. So after 4 days of this arbitration, I'm in my superintendent's truck, and I'm holding my phone. And at that time, it was the old Nextel walkie-talkie phone. And I'm holding my phone, and I'm saying to myself, how can I make sure this never happens again? And I looked at my phone, and I'm like, hey, why don't we use the mobile phone to document what's happening on the job site? Right. And my superintendent looks at me and he says, that's a good idea because I don't have time to go to the bathroom, yet alone go write things down in the trailer. Right. So, and my next thought is, well, since the call goes through a third party network, there's a timestamp by a third party on it. So the next morning, I talked to the arbitrator, and the arbitrator told me that, Peter, this is a good idea because the guys don't write things down. And if they do write it down, you can't read it because they don't spell well, maybe, and they don't want to be embarrassed about that. So they make it illegible. So I went back. My neighbor, my office, the company next door was an engineering company, and I got an engineer, and we downloaded the software development kit from Motorola.
Yeah.
We plugged it into the phone. We were able to capture a call to answer the call that came in, and we put the earpiece to a sound card, and we sent 3 beeps back. And it didn't take very long to do it. We were able to do that, and then we had someone on the job site. They would just push the button and talk, and then it would go right into our computer, and then we stored it in a database and then transcribed it for reports.
And so it came from a phone number that was a company phone that you knew who that phone was assigned to. So you kind of already knew who the person was talking on the other end, those kind of things, and time stamped, date stamped, everything that you needed to know kind of right then and there. Were you able at that time was it just voice communication at that time, just a transcript?
It was just audio at that time. This is back in 2001. Okay. 25 years ago. All right.
Yeah.
So it was just audio. My first customer was the Turner on the San Diego Convention project here in San Diego, a $250 million job. And I knew someone that worked at Turner, and we were talking about it. And he says, "Gosh, you got to come down and talk to our team." So I went down and presented it to a team. There were 15 superintendents in the room, and their prior process was they had one piece of paper, and they were supposed to pass that between 15 different people. And each person was supposed to write down, this is true, their synopsis on that same piece of paper. And of course,
you're kidding me. Same piece of paper, 15 guys.
Yeah, that was their process. And as you can imagine, didn't work very well.
We're talking the largest construction company on the planet Earth at that time. You know what I mean? Turner Construction, one of the largest, I guess. One piece of paper, 15 superintendents, write all your stuff down here. I want to know the details.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously you can see that wouldn't be very convenient, because when you wanted to write something down, where was the paper, or the other person had it, and had to find it, and it wasn't working. So I went down there. We had this meeting. Everyone was there. I told them what it is. I demonstrated it, and they clapped. The whole room just started clapping. Maybe I've got something here, you know?
Yeah, right. Maybe you got a little something. You don't even have to train those guys to talk on the phone. I mean, it's easy.
Well, that's right. They all had Nextels anyhow, right? So it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And and we were actually able to provide. We set an array of phones to call. They could actually call for each job, but also for what they were calling about, with just the contact in their phone. So that's kind of what caused me to decide to get into this business and sell my construction company to one of my employees here.
Well, that's a pretty good kickstart, I guess, if you're going to get into it.
Well,
so yeah.
Well, the next thing that happened is, I sent an email to Nextel. I said, "Here's what I did." And, they came back immediately and said, "How fast can we scale this nationally?" and so forth. And I got a lot of attention from Nextel. And then we wound up signing an agreement with them, and they provided phones, and we had racks of phones. There were if you put a cell phone 6 inches from another one, it doesn't interfere with each other. So they were all 6 inches apart in these racks. Each, I don't know how many, but there were about 200 phones in this whole rack, or maybe 2 racks of phones. And that actually stayed that way for 14 years. And the reason is because it worked every time.
Yeah. It wasn't broke.
Very solid. And I thought they would want to change it. I thought they would never want to, but they did. Yeah. And we actually built those and shipped them to Nextel International too. They were using them in Mexico so kind of that's kind of where this whole thing came from. There's some evolution that also we can talk about. You asked me about where Command Post came from. The first product was called Skylog. It was the name we gave it.
Okay.
And then the founders of Nextel contacted me and they said, "Hey, we're kind of interested in what you're doing." Next thing I knew, they flew out and they were in my office. Next thing I know, Brian McCall a check because needed for $100,000. Right there on the spot, gave it to me. I'm like, "Okay, you're serious." And he wound up buying control with his friends of the company, and they have been running it ever since. And right now, it's trading on NASDAQ. So I did leave there in 2000. That was 2001. I left in 2008 to start Note Vault, and the reason I did is because they didn't care too much about construction. They were interested in cable box installers and trash haulers and the typical dispatch user. Right.
Right. Right.
And I really wanted to focus on contractors. So I left the company called Pacific Data Vision. It's now called Anterix. And I started NoteVault, which I built using what they call PSTN, Public Switch Telephone Network, because it wasn't a walkie-talkie. You just call on a phone. So our
Okay.
customers would store their project as a contact. It would be the name of the project would be the contact name, and they just put it in their phone. If they wanted to record a note, they would just call, beep, and they would leave a message, and then we would transcribe it. And then shortly thereafter, the iPhone came out, right? The first iPhone.
Sure.
And we're like, wow, that's pretty cool. So we wrote an app for that. And that became one of the first, I believe it was the first iPhone app for construction, or especially for daily reports. And it was interesting. One thing that happened there is when we launched that app as a way to capture notes because the whole system was a back-end web-based system, right? And we launched the app and just to be able to capture notes. And then we got flooded with thousands of inbounds per day. I mean, it was just jamming everything up. I had to actually go in into the app store and say, do not download this app unless you're a customer of NoteVault, because they couldn't do anything with it. They could download the app and they couldn't add a project or a user or anything else.
Oh, I see.
And they probably thought it was something else. And it was, when I look back at it, it could have been, maybe we should have pivoted a little bit and addressed these thousands of inbounds.
Yeah. You had the first, what is it? Slack.
Yeah. So but anyhow, we shut down the traffic, and then we just went with NoteVault. And then in 2020, I wound up selling that to Bentley Systems. And so once my non-compete was over with Bentley, customers had reached out to me to do it again. And so I had a lot of ideas that I picked up over the preceding 16 years or what have you. And I decided to do it again. Plus, I don't need outside funding now, so it makes it much easier. I can just focus on the product and customers.
I got you. So this then became Command Post. So we've got Command Post. You always talk about, in our first conversation, we were talking about, let's keep it simple. And I'm in total agreement with you on that, because I think a lot of times people get overwrought with all of, the different functions of their software, of their product. Because you can easily go down the rabbit hole. Kind of address that a little bit, and just from your construction experience and from your, again, technology experience, how has that benefited folks the most, and what the key behind that?
Yeah, well, the simplicity is key. We found that, think about human behavior, and it makes me think that, what the most popular radio station in America is? It's WIFM. What's in it for me, right? So, and it's notorious, right? You have to pound these guys on the head and hold up their checks to get them to document things. And it's not that they don't want to, it's that it's hard when you're at the work face and putting work in place or pouring concrete and all of this. And also it's anticlimactic after work. You're tired. You don't want to sit down and write a report and try to remember what happened that day.
Yeah.
It's a situation that just, you can't really overcome, because it's just not, the behavior isn't there. So we found, though, that and with our app, because it was so simple, you push the button and hold it and you talk and you let it go and it beeps back to you and you're done. So we found that if it's simple enough, that they'll do it. If it's easier than trying to remember to do it later. And the problem remembering to do it later is you don't, and then you're driving home in your car and you remember then, and okay, when I get home, I'll do it. And then you go home and you don't do it, and you're driving back to work and you remember, and then it never gets captured, and it's just one pains in the neck. So that's the threshold. If it's easier than trying to remember to do it later, or writing it down on a piece of drywall or something, they'll do it. So that's the primary, that's the bar for us, to make it easier than the alternatives. And that's benefited two ways. One is you don't have to beat them over the head to do the documentation. The second is they're more likely to do it as the events occur, right? That's what they call contemporaneous, is the legal term for that, or real time. If you document things as they occur, you have an irrefutable record of events. And that's how Turner was able, and didn't left this part out, on that first project, they wound up in a $15 million dispute on that project. And because they had timestamp messages throughout the day, 8:32 in the morning, I went there, this is what I saw. 9:45, I went there, this is what I saw. 10:30, I went somewhere else, this is what I saw. They had blow by blow. It was impossible to talk your way out of that, right? They settled, that major lawsuit. Taking documentation taken at the time, contemporaneous documentation is irrefutable. And as a matter of fact, when you'd write a synopsis of what happened that day, at the end of the day or the next day, it's considered hearsay in many jurisdictions and inadmissible in a court.
Right.
And the reason is obvious. Sometimes people can't remember what they had for lunch that day.
Or they're just making up a story.
There's that. Well, let's give people the benefit of the doubt, right? That maybe they just don't remember, because there's lots of reasons why the information isn't good. However, if it's captured at the moment, right, in the heat of the moment, so to speak, people are convinced that that's your best recollection at that time, and you weren't coached by someone else on what to put in your report and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, I asked you about, so does this, you've got all these different platforms, the Procores, the ACCs, and all those kind of things. Do you integrate with these platforms so that they actually have timestamp records in these daily reports that they're talking about, or maybe being able to generate RFIs or, responses on submittals, anything like that?
Well, we do. We have in our app, we have something called topics. And topics can be RFI, potential change order, deliveries, all of those. And they're customizable by team and by project. And so right now they're put into our report and they're grouped by topics. And the workflow to follow up on the RFI is typically going to be done in whatever project management system they're using. Where the project management platforms break down is that they're not easy enough. The guys wind up doing it at the end of the day. Our customers put 9 times the content in, and all of our customers right now have another way to do daily reports, but the daily reports aren't good enough to protect them. They're not getting enough.
No, I get it. Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense to me. Again, I've been on a job before where, I've had a situation where it actually went into arbitration. Yes. Had everything documented in the notebook, kind of thing. But I kept pretty good notes. And so in where I was, it did save us. But I definitely get where you're talking about. Every municipality in some way or another is slightly different. Every judge is slightly different. Every arbitrator is slightly different. Every lawyer is slightly different. And the ways that they can argue, kind of at the end of the day, argue their way out of a situation. Well, it should have been this way or it could have been this way. Is it possible that, and the way that they phrase it?
Well, the strategy in litigation for the defendant is usually to waste court time. They want to burn court time, right? So when you have court, you get, okay, we're giving you 3 days or 4 days or whatever it is of court time, and that you have to finish in that time. At the end, that's it.
Yeah.
If they don't have the money, or if they just are son of a guns and they don't want to pay, they'll burn court time and they'll question everything. And that's another reason that, just to bring up something, another reason to use when you capture videos or audio or photos in our app, because it's captured in our app, we can certify for the 10 years after the job is done that it's not AI, that it was captured in our app at that time by that person. And, that avoids an argument about a video or photo saying, oh, that wasn't at that job, or that wasn't, you altered that or something like that. That's going to be a huge problem. It already is, but it's going to become a bigger problem as people realize this, these getting into litigation discovery comes up. And if you've had custody, if you take a picture with your camera and then upload it to Procore, you had custody. You can never say that was not AI, right? So it'll burn up And you asked me about the integrations. We push our reports automatically into SharePoint, any number of systems. We do have integrations with other systems as well, but it's put in as a PDF. And the reason is because our PDF looks good. You can play the videos in the reports. You can watch click and get full resolution images directly in the reports. They have a weather feed in there. And they just look really good, and they have a lot of information, and customers love them. Of course, our app, the user interface is like Instagram for construction on the phone. So you can just scroll and see what's happening on the job, send comments back on something, ask questions in there with your teams. Serves as also a smart collaboration.
Okay, so smart collaborator, meaning it's also something you can share with your client.
Yes.
If you wanted to.
If you want to.
Or if there's a requirement that says, hey, I need a daily report every day. I had some clients in the past that, they needed to produce. They called it a foreman's report, and they had to produce it every day for the client because the client was very involved in the day-to-day. I'll say it was it was kind of a government or a local government projects that they were dealing with. And so it had to deal with local utilities and things like that. So everything had to be documented for them.
Mhm.
So it was interesting because we went through a lot of details about how they were producing that report, and it was specific to a client. So are you able to, that same report, like I said, specific to a client, are you able to customize that reporting and how it looks?
Yes, you
Okay.
are. You're able to configure it. We also have the colors for certain logos, a certain color. We have accent colors that match that throughout the report to make it look really nice. The thing that customers love about number one is that it comes at the same time every day. It's like clockwork. They know that at 9 a.m. they've checked their email, they had their coffee, and all of a sudden they get the report for the day. So that they like that they can rely on it, and it's easy to scroll through. And it can, some of the reports have hundreds and hundreds of photos, so maybe
Right.
100 pages even. So they love that. For customers our customers feel comfortable giving their clients access, they can give them a read-only access so that they can scroll, kind of like Instagram. I can make a comment on somebody's note, but I can't edit their note, right?
Yeah.
And we prevent owners from posting in there too, because that's not their area. They feel connected. Sometimes they don't need to go to the job site because they can see a lot of, what's happening in good detail, so they don't need to drive out there as much. So, yeah.
It's an interesting thing. And again, simplicity is the key here. It's something that we've done with, construction reporting as far as the daily reports has been around, basically since the beginning. If you go to the Empire State Building, you can start to see all the different reports of the different, how the things are scheduled out, the different daily reports from the project managers that were on those jobs and the superintendents that were on those jobs, all on paper. It looked really, really nice. But in today's world, when you've got a 70% complete set of drawings and the engineering drawings aren't quite there, and you've got to document all of the things, all the steps that you have to take in order to make sure that the build is done correctly, you got to have something like this, right?
Especially if it's incomplete drawings, if it's a design build or design assist or anything
They're all incomplete these days.
design as you build thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right. So what you need to capture is what happened that wasn't supposed to happen, what didn't happen that was supposed to happen, right? And then progress
Right.
and problems of the events, because it's rampant. It happens,
And
So
I kind of want to stay on that with you for a little bit because I want to talk again. Two guys talking construction. It's been this way for a while, where it seems as though the planning phase, even though it seems to take forever, there's not a lot of planning that gets done because the planning is never seems to be set in stone. I did a podcast, a couple different podcasts about this, where we've got a 70% set of drawings. It's a permit set. Well, they call it the permit set, but yet it's not quite there, right? It's got a stamp on it, but there's going to be some changes made, but we don't know necessarily whether there are. There's a couple of gray areas in here. I'd like to get your take on it. Like, why do you think we're doing this? And don't we think we'd be better if we just take a little bit more time and finish the plan?
absolutely. I totally agree. Contractors are all too happy to start a job with 70% drawings sometimes. And that creates problems. And, the big mistake that I've seen in my company, construction company, we did this. It's like it's in plan check, or maybe we're going to start construction and, and then we're going to get the permit. And so we can get the permit and call for inspection the same day the permit's issued, right? Get ahead of it. And then the permit drags on. Then we wind up having to demobilize the job,
Yeah.
right? Come back later, and you get moral issues. The projects never get back on track properly. So being prepared, right? There's a thing, proper preparation prevents, poor performance.
Yeah, my dad called it the 5 Ps. He actually had a
Yeah.
6 Ps. He called
Yeah.
it prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
Yeah. I was leaving that part out of it, But yeah, that's it. It's basic stuff. Like you mentioned, the Empire State Building. That was built in under 12 months
That is correct. Yes.
from dirt to the
Yeah.
finished building. And
But the key behind it, the key behind that build was before they ever put the first shovel in the ground, they knew exactly how much material they needed. They knew where they were going to get it from. They knew the timing of how they were going to get it. I mean, they knew that they were going to be pulling steel off the foundry floor, delivering it hot, basically. They knew all of these things, and they had it all mapped out is that this is how we do this. It was
Yeah.
basically modular construction taken to the highest level. It was
Yeah.
crazy
But
efficient.
this is 100 years ago. Okay.
And we haven't been able to do it since.
Well, yeah, one of our projects, another Turner project at Note Vault was the Spiral in New York, $4 or $5 billion project. And it took 5 years to build it. Right.
Mhm.
So 100 years later, it takes 5 times as long. Now, there's a lot of reasons. The buildings are far more complicated. There's a lot of regulations that didn't exist, and so forth. But the bottom line is that they did a great job planning. And if you look at the Hoover Dam, here's another example.
Yeah.
And you can, when you go to visit the dam, they have all their records. You can look. It's done with a pencil and paper, but it's every pore, every detail of the whole thing. It's mapped out, and they finished the job early.
Yeah.
Right now, it's unheard of. 80% of projects are a year or more behind schedule. We have a question, and then that gets wrapped around the axle because whatever it is. It's just,
Well, everybody seems to have their own reason of why. Some say, well, it's regulation, kind of like you talk about. Well, there's regulations, like there's safety regulations that we didn't have before that we have now, that it slows down the productivity of the worker. And it's like, well, is that true? Is that not true? Maybe. But then there's the idea of the planning phase. The planning phase to me seems as though that it's a shorter planning phase. We got these GCs, to your point, who are all too excited to start getting shovels in the ground because it's one day closer to getting to that draw request on,
yeah. Just
Yeah,
one
go.
more to add to that. One of the reasons I think they're anxious, at least I'm speaking for myself in this case, that once the shovel hits the ground, you're certain that you've got the project, right? Before
Yeah.
that, anything could happen. They could go sideways, go to someone else. But once you're on the site digging, that's a contract. You're good.
That is something I didn't think about. I thought that is funny. Like the contract's in place and the shovels are in the ground and my gear is in sight. I'm mobilized. We're committed to this effort. So yeah, I didn't think
Consummating
about
the
that.
contract.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I just, again, so all these different technology solutions are out there. Everyone is looking kind of for that same thing. When the McKinsey reports come out, to your point, 80% of these projects are a year over or out of schedule, out of budget, these kind of things. And the McKinsey's coming out and saying, well, productivity hasn't increased in construction for a century, basically.
It's gone down.
Yeah, it's gone down. Like we're less efficient now than we were, back then. And why is that? With all of our tools, right? With all of our technology, with all of our smart people, this kind of thing. Are we just in our own way at the end of the day?
I think the problem is self-induced. I do. And you have to, if you step back and ask someone that isn't in the industry, and you say, if 80% of projects are a year or more behind on large projects, what's the problem? They're going to say your schedule's the problem. Obviously, it takes longer to build. If the schedules were reasonable, right, then that's a sign right there. People are over optimistic on the schedules. We used to have a joke with one of our sales guys because they would sell anything they want. It says, if you call them up, it says, yes, for a 4-month project done in 1 month, press 1. For a $2 million project done for 800,000, press 2. It's like,
yeah,
these unrealistic expectations, and people got lazy. I think the training was at that time. People were more of a team, committed. I think that we've lost some of that.
Yeah. So I think that's funny because again, it is true. If you want a 4-month project done in a month, dial, press number 1 kind of thing. I think it's interesting how I used to do estimating, of course, as a project manager, you're going to estimate your jobs and do your budgeting. I think it's funny how you can tell. I would always tell them, it's like, here's your budget. This is the estimate. This is what this looks like. And every time the owner would go, well, there's just no way, we can't do that. And I was like, well, I said, you can either spend it here or you're going to spend it after in change orders somehow. I said, I have rarely ever been off by more than, 5% when it comes to these numbers. I said, I can tell you right now, this is to build this job, to build what's on this print. This is what it costs. And every time they're like, well, what can we do? And I said, well, we take this, and this, and we do that. I said, yeah, we can see that, but you're probably going to see some other costs over here. And again, they always want the same outcome, But they just don't want to pay for that same outcome. But they think that if they hear that better price, that, magically it's going to make it feel better when they have to, cough up some extra money on the end. I don't know. I don't get the mentality of that.
Well, I think it's a lot of people are like that. Let's just say some people are like that, but the contractor has to say no sometimes. I found that there were, I'll give you an example on one of our projects. This is years ago at my construction company. There was the sidewalk outside was higher than the sill for a wood frame wall, right? So we put in a request for information. What should have happened is they should have raised the stem wall above grade and so forth. But the architect came back because the owner didn't want to pay for it. We'll just put sheet metal there, right? Well, it didn't work.
Yeah.
But who got in trouble? I did. Because you can't do that, right? It should have known better. And but the owner, it was the owner's building. They didn't want to pay for it. The architect said, do this. We just did it. But, we were responsible. So you got to be careful saying yes.
To everything.
It's okay to say no. If you know that that's not the right thing to do, you got to say no. Because it's going to, in the end, you can't say, well, because a contractor is expected to know. Right.
Yeah, it's actually in the drawings itself. Like in the drawings on the very front page, it usually says somewhere in here, by the way, if we missed anything, if you see something wrong, you have the obligation to say something, that there is something wrong with this set of prints. There's something. Now, obviously you find that out sometimes mid-build, you get into a set and it wasn't quite as thoroughly gone over as you thought, or maybe it was 70% complete and you go, oh yeah, this is not going to work.
And that particular project I was just talking about, when people do things like that, and yes, I said yes instead of no, but I really should have fired the client. You know what I mean? It's okay to fire a client. And at that time I was building my business and I wouldn't say no to anybody. And that was a problem. It's better. It's hard to say no sometimes, but it could be the best decision you made.
Yeah. I've been writing some articles on this. I've got a 6-part series that I'm kind of coming out with, and I'm actually working on, kind of part 2 before our conversation here, but it's a little bit out like the coercion economy. What I call the coercion economy is, I've got this $10 million job. You either want it or you don't. I'm going to find the lowest bidder anyway. And that is I feel like that's a kind of a race to the bottom for construction. If we're wondering why we can't get the Empire State Buildings, those types of builds done, it's partially because of that race to the bottom where you've got lowest bidder thinking they can do something they really can't or really shouldn't.
This is just a new thought based on what you're saying. And we compared the new world to the existing world, I guess, to the pre-tech, or pre, high tech. I think when people actually sat down and wrote all this stuff down, they understood it, right? So when they were able to planning, they knew that, gosh, if I'm putting this number I'm putting down, because like when you write notes, even though
it was a commitment,
you've got that, and we can say, no, this bid doesn't make sense if we go below this amount, because we know that it's not going to make money, or we're not going to buy the job, so they say, right? But I think that the planning, people, it's kind of like too mundane now. It's kind of like, we'll just do a change order. I'm not going to plan it. If there's a problem, it's the customer's problem. Change orders are not the panacea, right? They disrupt the flow sometimes. It's problematic. It would be better for everybody if they would identify, holes in the plans ahead of time.
Right.
And so I'm a big proponent of, design build or design assist, whatever you want to call it, IPD or whatever it is, but to have a team, a construction team or contractor with their, the MEP subs on board.
Yeah. And I think you're onto something there too. Builders know how to build. A lot of times, and sometimes you get into a situation where you got a project manager understands what it means to kind of organize the build, but maybe doesn't understand the process of how it actually gets built. Like they know they have this idea in their head, it should take you about this long, but they haven't really consulted maybe the specialty contractor. If you're doing a GC kind of thing, they haven't consulted the specialty contractor on exactly how are we going to perform this? Where are we going to put the crane if we're going to set this thing? Like, how do we set this up? What are we going to run into? What are the constraints? Otherwise, they're just putting a set of dates onto a CPM schedule and not really getting any real input on how something gets built.
You're bringing up a great point, because that would solve, I'm going to say 90% of the problems if people would actually just consider these things and talk about it and work it out. In the predominant portion of construction projects are hard bid, right? Where there's a bid. And if you've ever been, I'm sure you've been through this, in the war room where all the bids are coming in and you got to field them, because you don't get these bids necessarily before 10 minutes before it's due, because they don't want it shopped.
They don't want to shop. Yeah, you don't shop my bid.
Back their bids. So it's impossible to qualify these to any real extent. I mean, it's really hard, because you might get 5 mechanical bids or 3 to 5, and you're supposed to, even though they'll send the actual, scope and exclusions ahead of time and just send the price at the last minute.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. There's just no time. I mean, you put that bid together, and then, the joke, which is pretty much true, is the guy who missed something got the job. So they start out behind the 8 ball. You know what I mean? Day one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, they miss something, and then they have to figure out, okay, how can we make that into a change order somehow, because they're trying to, it's the CYA back again.
Yeah. CYA. That's right. That's our motto is.
Well, the reason that you're in, again, it's kind of the command post, thing. It's like, you've got to document exactly what you do, because there are people out there that will definitely try to take advantage of any
everything
step.
And anything. Yeah. And the other thing that, good documentation not only helps you prevail, right, on a dispute and avoid litigation, but it lets you keep the relationship. Because what happens is when, people say, well, I'll pay for that. But in their mind, they're like, you're never going to do another job for this company again, right? You're done with us. And if they agree, because they see the blow by blow record of events and they can see that it's their fault, well, yes, they'll pay, and you get the next job. So you keep that relationship.
Yeah.
And what final thing on the documentation, typical systems out there are, the documentation comes from the superintendent, a project manager, and that level, and it's consumed by everybody else. And you're omitting where the rubber meets the road is the foreman level at the crew, putting the work in place. That's the person you want documenting things. But in California, 50% of the people in construction, English is a second language, and some are. Yeah. So they're somewhat embarrassed to have to do a report at all. So they're not included in the reporting for the most part. Right. And we've addressed that by allowing our customers, our users, at the interface at the work face, as post sits, you can have any of 120 input languages. And they can speak Spanish in their own tongue. It's transcribed into Spanish, and then below that we put an English translation in the reports. Now, guess what? Now they feel empowered. They look good. They're showing the proof of work that they did and all this work they did. And in one case recently, it turned out to save $500,000 of rework for one of our customers, because the construction manager wanted them to remove and replace this work because they didn't have good enough documentation before they poured the concrete. But on the project with the foreman, we're shooting videos and photos of all of it before they place the concrete. In one meeting, one meeting, they reviewed the reports and the issue went away. They said, satisfied, you do not need to remove and replace that. Now, removing and replacing $500,000 worth of concrete is $500,000, but then you have the delay cost on the project, which could be you don't even know. Look at some of these jobs are massive. Right. I don't know what liquidated damages can be in the hundreds or millions of dollars.
Right. Yeah. It's basically 3 times as much. I always say it's 3 times as much, because not only you get the tear out, you get the build back, but you also have the opportunity cost that you're missing on someplace else where you should have been doing something else.
Yeah. So it's a horror, and it's 15% of construction, and that's a whole nother podcast for us.
Yeah, it's a whole nother. I know it. That is the thing about construction. That is the one thing about construction. There is never a lack of problems. There's never a lack of something to solve in this crazy business of ours. But again, I do like the thought of the command post, and I do like what you're doing is that part that let's keep this thing simple, because I think you're right. We have got to document what we do in a timely manner from the spot of the foul, basically, and go from there. That's exactly it. That does need to happen. We have to have that.
Yeah, it's important if you can have an issue that you can resolve in one meeting. I've got many examples of how our customers have.
Yeah, we're 45 minutes goes pretty fast. We're at 45 minutes already, man. I was going to wrap this up, but I do want to know, let people know, how can folks get a hold of you or get a hold of Command Post? How can they see the product?
Okay, it's the app itself. The company's Command Post. The app is Command Post Notes, Notes, and so you can just go to the App Store. It's free for single users, and you can CYA today.
Very good. CYA today, as Peter says, that is a great idea. Let's say if you're a small, maybe even mid-sized builder, this is something you guys definitely need to consider. It's a good starting point to making sure that you're getting proper daily notes on your jobs, getting them tracked. Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Appreciate it, and have a good day, and look forward to another conversation with you.
Yeah, we're going to do this again real soon. For all of you out there in the ConTech world, thanks for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next week. We'll have some more new and exciting news. But until then, y'all stay safe out there. We'll see y'all very soon.
Peace.